They say you can't die in your dreams, but they're wrong. I've died 17 times, each death more vivid and agonizing than the last, each one carving a little more of my soul away until I feel like a ghost haunting my own life, a hollowed-out shell who only truly lives in the perpetual, rain-lashed nightmare of the Blackwood Motel. It's always the same, a ritual I cannot break. I'm on a long, lonely drive, the kind where the yellow lines on the asphalt become a hypnotic rhythm and the radio sputters in and out of static, playing fragments of songs from a decade I'd rather forget. When the sky inevitably opens up, not with a gentle rain, but a torrential biblical downpour that turns the windshield into a swirling, opaque mess, the wipers fighting a losing battle against the deluge, forcing me to slow to a crawl and search for any sign of shelter. The only refuge is the flickering, moth-eaten neon sign of the old Blackwood Motel, a relic off a forgotten highway that doesn't appear on any of my maps, its vacancy sign a sickly, pulsating red that seems to beat in time with my own rising dread, a siren call to my own personal hell. The clerk is always a gaunt, cadaverous man with yellowish eyes and skin the texture of old parchment, who doesn't speak, doesn't even seem to breathe, just slides a tarnished brass key for room 213 across the counter, his long, bony finger tapping twice on the number as if sealing a contract I never agreed to. The room is a perfect, suffocating time capsule of the 70s, all brown and orange floral patterns, smelling of dust, old cigarettes, and something else underneath, something faintly metallic and organic, like old blood or decay, a scent that clings to the back of my throat. Exhausted from the drive and the storm, my body betraying my mind's silent screams, I collapse onto the stiff, lumpy mattress that sighs a cloud of dust and fall into a deep, unnatural sleep almost instantly. A sleep that feels less like rest and more like being drugged, pulled down into the depths against my will. That's when the show begins. I wake up in the dream, in that same motel room, but everything is sharper, more vividly detailed. The colors oversaturated and the air thick and cold, carrying a psychic chill that seeps into my bones, and I can move. I can walk around. I can feel the rough polyester of the bedspread under my fingers, but I know, with a certainty that is worse than any fear, what's coming. The countdown has begun. The first time, the door to the room slowly creaked open, its whine the sound of a dying animal, and a tall man in a long, dark coat, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat that cast his features into utter shadow, stood there, silhouetted against the dimly lit walkway outside. He didn't move, he just watched me, and I felt a wave of such profound, existential terror that I was paralyzed long before the physical paralysis of the dream death took hold. I tried to scream, to demand he leave, but no sound came out, my voice stolen by the oppressive atmosphere of the room. Then he was just next to the bed. He hadn't walked. He had simply transitioned from the doorway to my bedside in the space between blinks. His hand, cold and leathery, covered my mouth, and a straight razor, polished to a mirror finish, flashed in the dim light, catching my own wide, terrified eyes in its reflection before it swept across my throat. I felt the searing, white-hot pain, the warm, coppery gush of blood that soaked the pillow, the desperate, choking gurgles as I drowned in my own life, and then I jolt back to reality in the real room 213, gasping, drenched in a cold sweat, my hands flying to my unmarked neck, the phantom pain still echoing in my nerves. The next time I dreamed it, he was already in the room, standing in the corner when I woke up, a patient statue of shadow and menace. The time after that, he was sitting in the garish orange chair, his hat tilted down as if he were napping, but I could feel his gaze, a physical weight. Each dream death is different. Sometimes the razor, sometimes a knife plunged deep into my chest. The feeling of the blade scraping against my ribs, a sensation I can still feel in the daylight. Sometimes he just holds a pillow over my face until I suffocate, the fabric smelling of stale perfume and desperation, my limbs flailing uselessly until darkness takes me. But the location is always the same. The Blackwood Motel, room 213. I started avoiding long drives, taking trains and planes, moving across the country, but the dream found me. I'd fall asleep in my own safe, modern bed and wake up on that brown and orange mattress, the smell of decay and the storm already waiting. The Hat Man was a constant, my personal reaper in a nightly play where I was the victim and the audience, forced to watch my own gruesome finale on an endless loop. Last night, it was the 17th time. I woke in the dream and he was already on top of me, his weight crushing, impossibly heavy, pinning me to the bed, his face still a shadow under the hat, but I could feel his breath, cold and smelling of grave dirt and old pennies. But this time was different. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply held me down, and for the first time he spoke. His voice was the sound of gravel and broken glass, a dry rustle that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You have paid your debt?" he whispered, the words slithering into my ears. "The door is open." He let me go, stood up, and walked out of the motel room, leaving the door ajar. For the first time in this recurring nightmare, I was free. I got up, my dream body trembling, my legs weak, and walked to the door, each step a monumental effort of will. I looked out into the motel's courtyard, expecting the same perpetual, rainy night. It wasn't. It was a bright, sunny, almost oppressively cheerful day. The sky a perfect, cloudless blue, the air warm and still. And standing there in the cracked asphalt parking lot were dozens, maybe hundreds of people. Men in suits, women in dresses from different eras, children in outdated play clothes. All of them were perfectly still, perfectly silent, all staring directly at me with hollow, empty eyes, their faces pale and waxy like mannequins. And I knew, with a certainty that froze my soul, that these were all the others. The ones who had stayed in room 213 before me. The ones who had also died their dream deaths over and over until their debt was paid, just like me. They weren't ghosts. They were just waiting. Waiting for what? I woke up then, for real, in my own bed. The relief was so profound I wept. Great. Heaving sobs that shook my entire body. The sun was streaming through my window. Birds were singing. The world was normal. It was over. The curse was broken. I was free. But later that day, as I was making coffee, trying to ground myself in the mundane ritual of it, I saw it. A small, innocuous thing. A flicker of movement in the polished, stainless steel surface of my kettle. I leaned closer, my heart starting to hammer a familiar, terrified rhythm. For just a fraction of a second, I didn't see my own haggard reflection. I saw the sun-bleached, silent courtyard of the Blackwood Motel, and the crowd of people, their heads now all tilted in unison, their empty eyes fixed on me. And I saw the Hat Man, standing at the very back, separate from the crowd, his head tilted, and though I couldn't see his face, I knew he was smiling, a gesture that transmitted directly into my mind as if to say, soon. The door is open. They aren't in my dreams anymore. There in the reflections, in the shimmer of a puddle after a rain, in the dark screen of my turned-off television, in the corner of my eye every time I turn my head, waiting for me to finally wake up for the last time and join them in that silent, sun-drenched parking lot for eternity. My debt is paid, but the invitation has been issued. And I know it's only a matter of time before I have to RSVP, and when I do, I will take my place among the silent, waiting crowd, and I will stare at the next occupant of room 213 with the same hollow, patient eyes. The first time it happened, I wrote it off as a bad dream, the kind fueled by late-night pepperoni pizza and the stress of a looming project deadline at my soulless data entry job, where I spent 8 hours a day staring at a screen, inputting numbers that felt increasingly meaningless, each keystroke echoing in the sterile, fluorescent-lit office that sucked the soul out of everyone who stepped inside, a place where time moved like molasses and the only escape was the constant drone of the air conditioner and the occasional ping of an email notification that never brought good news, leaving me drained and hollowed out by the time I stumbled home through the rain-slicked streets, the city lights reflecting in puddles like shattered dreams. I'd fallen asleep on my back, a rookie mistake I'd later learned to avoid at all costs, and the transition from sleep to wakefulness was anything but smooth. It was a sudden, violent jolt into awareness, my mind snapping online while my body remained a corpse in the bed, trapped in a state of pure helplessness that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, a feeling so profoundly isolating that it made me question the very nature of my existence, as if I were a ghost in my own skin, watching from behind. Glass as the world moved on without me. My eyes were open, scanning the familiar terrain of my bedroom. The faint, city-glow orange light bleeding through the blinds, painting stripes across my cluttered desk and the laundry chair piled with clothes that I'd been meaning to fold for days. The shadows in the corners seeming deeper than usual, more substantive, as if they were gathering strength, and the air felt thick, heavy, almost liquid, making it hard to breathe even before the pressure started. Carrying the scent of dust and my own fierce sweat, a metallic tang that coated my tongue. I could hear the distant, rhythmic hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, the occasional whoosh of a car on the wet street outside, all the normal night sounds of my apartment that usually lulled me to sleep, but now felt like a soundtrack to a nightmare, each sound amplified and distorted, as if I were hearing them through water, and beneath it all a low, almost imperceptible vibration that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, a frequency that set my teeth on edge. But I couldn't move, not a finger, not a toe. A leaden, invisible weight was pressing down on my chest, making each breath a shallow, desperate sip of air, and I felt a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead, the sheets clinging to my skin like a shroud, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I was not alone, that something had slipped into the room with me, something ancient and hungry. That's when I saw it, a deeper darkness coalescing in the corner of the room, near the closet door, a patch of void that swallowed the orange light, a man-shaped shadow that seemed to bleed into the very fabric of reality. And as it detached itself from the wall and began to glide towards the bed, moving with an unnatural, silent fluidity, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room temperature, a cold that seeped into my bones and made my teeth chatter silently, a deep freeze that promised nothing but oblivion. I tried to scream, to thrash, to do anything to break this waking nightmare, but my vocal cords were frozen, my body a prison of unresponsive flesh, and all I could manage was a silent, internal plea for it to stop, a prayer to a God I hadn't believed in since childhood. But the only answer was the slow, deliberate advance of the shadow, which now seemed to absorb the very light from the room, deepening the darkness around us. The shadow figure loomed over me, and I felt an intelligence radiating from it, a cold, ancient malice that was focused solely on me, as if it had been waiting for this moment, for me, specifically, and it leaned in, its featureless face inches from mine, and I was engulfed by a wave of pure, primal terror, the kind that scrapes away all civilized thought and leaves only the raw, screaming animal underneath. And in that moment, I knew I was going to die, that this thing was going to consume me, in some unimaginable way, sucking out my essence like marrow from a bone. And then, as suddenly as it began, the pressure vanished. I gasped a full, ragged breath, my limbs flailing as I scrambled against the headboard, fumbling for the lamp switch, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst from my chest, the sudden brightness of the bulb making me wince as it flooded the room, banishing the shadows, revealing an empty, ordinary bedroom. But the feeling of dread lingered like a bad smell, a psychic stain that wouldn't wash away, and I could still feel the ghost of that cold presence on my skin. I was drenched in a cold sweat, my pulse racing, and I spent the rest of the night sitting up with all the lights on, too terrified to close my eyes, jumping at every creak and groan of the old building, my mind replaying the event over and over like a broken record, each time amplifying the horror, wondering if I was losing my grip on reality. For weeks, I told myself it was just sleep paralysis, a known medical phenomenon, a glitch in the brain's wake-up sequence, something that could be explained away with science and rationality, a temporary misfiring of neurons that created these hallucinations, and I clung to that explanation like a lifeline. I researched it online, finding comfort in the clinical terms. Hypnopompic hallucinations, the intruder, the incubus, reading forums where others shared similar experiences, and for a while, that helped, but the next time it happened, the shadow was closer, and I swear I felt the chill of its presence, a pocket of winter air in my warm room, and this time it didn't just loom. It reached out a hand, or what passed for a hand, a tendril of darkness that brushed against my arm, leaving a trail of icy numbness in its wake, and I felt a surge of panic that left me trembling for hours afterward, the sensation of its touch branded into my memory. The third time, it wasn't just watching. It spoke. The voice wasn't a sound that traveled through the air, but words etched directly into my mind, a sibilant, grinding whisper that said, "I have been waiting for you to see me." And those words echoed in my head for days, haunting my waking hours, making it hard to concentrate at work, where I started making mistakes, inputting wrong numbers, getting reprimanded by my supervisor, which only added to my stress and made the episodes more frequent. A vicious cycle that was slowly eroding my sanity. That's when I knew this was no simple glitch. This was a conversation, and it had only just begun. A dialogue with something that existed in the spaces between waking and dreaming. Something that fed on my fear, but also seemed to offer a twisted form of companionship in my loneliness. I started sleeping with the lights on, which only made the shadows in the room sharper, more defined, creating more places for it to hide. And I began to avoid sleep until my eyes burned and my hands shook from caffeine and exhaustion. But eventually, my body would betray me and I'd crash, only to be jolted awake into that familiar, petrified state. The shadow always there, waiting, as if it had never left. The figure began to change, its form becoming more detailed each time. I could now make out the suggestion of long, thin fingers and the hollow pits where eyes should be, and sometimes I thought I saw a glimmer of something in those pits, an intelligence that was both alien and intimately familiar, and the whispers became more coherent, telling me things I didn't want to know, like how my childhood dog really died, not from old age, but from something I had done, a memory I had suppressed, and it showed me images of that day, vivid and painful, making me relive the guilt I had buried, forcing me to confront the darkest parts of myself. Last night was the worst. It didn't just loom. It sat on the edge of my bed, the mattress dipping under its impossible weight, and the whispering was constant now, a torrent of promises and threats, telling me things about my own childhood I had buried, secrets I had never told anyone. Like the time I stole money from my mother's purse and let my brother take the blame, or the dark thoughts I had during my grandfather's funeral, and it didn't just recount them. It made me feel them again, the shame, the fear, the anger, as if I were living those moments anew, each emotion sharpened to a razor's edge, cutting deep into my psyche. "You are the door," it hissed, "and you are finally opening." This time, when the paralysis released me, I didn't scream. I didn't turn on the light. I just lay there in the darkness, catching my breath, and I realized with a sickening dread that the terror was now mingled with something else, something far worse. A horrifying, burgeoning curiosity, a need to know more, to understand what this thing was and why it had chosen me, as if it held the key to a truth I had been searching for my whole life. I found myself staring into the corner where it first appeared, not with fear, but with an aching need for it to return, to hear more of its terrible, enlightening truths, because despite the fear, it was offering me something I had always craved. Understanding, a reason for the emptiness I felt, a purpose to the pain, and that realization felt like a betrayal of everything I thought I was. The door it spoke of is in my mind, and I am no longer trying to keep it closed. I am waiting in the dark for it to open fully and to see what is on the other side, because somehow I know that whatever it is, it holds the answers to questions I've been too afraid to ask, and that thought terrifies me more than the shadow itself, but it also excites me in a way I'm ashamed to admit, and that, perhaps, is the most horrifying thing of all, because now I am not just a victim. I am a willing participant in my own damnation, and the line between nightmare and reality has blurred beyond recognition. It always starts with the hum, not the normal, benign hum of electronics, but a low, dissonant frequency that seems to originate from inside my own skull, a vibration that feels like it's tuning my very bones to a station of pure dread, a sound that has no external source but instead seems to be generated by the fear itself, growing in volume until it fills every crevice of my consciousness, making it impossible to think of anything else, a psychic drill boring into my sanity. I'm a nurse, working the grueling night shift at County General, so my sleep schedule is a fractured, fragile thing, a commodity more precious than gold, where 3 hours of uninterrupted rest feels like a miracle and a full night's sleep is a distant, mythical memory from a past life, before the constant barrage of beeping monitors, frantic codes, and the quiet, desperate sighs of patients fighting for their lives in the sterile, antiseptic-smelling halls that never truly get dark, where death is a frequent visitor I'm paid to politely usher in or forcefully turn away, my hands often trembling from too much coffee and too little hope, My apartment is my sanctuary, or it was, until the paralysis began. A place where I used to shed my scrubs and the lingering scent of mortality, where I could finally breathe and try to remember who I was outside of the hospital. But now it has become just another ward, another place of observation and terror, where the shadows are deeper and more malevolent than any I've seen in the ICU. The first episode was textbook. Waking up on my back, unable to move, a dark figure at the foot of the bed, its form indistinct but its presence overwhelmingly hostile. A silhouette cut from the fabric of absolute nothingness, and I could feel its gaze, a physical pressure on my skin, cold and invasive. I'd read about it, so I fought the panic, closed my eyes, and focused on wiggling a single toe until the spell broke, chanting a mantra in my head about neurotransmitters and REM cycles, clinging to the science I trusted, the empirical evidence that had always been my anchor in a job full of chaotic, unpredictable human suffering. It was frightening but manageable, a bizarre physiological event I could file away and forget, or so I desperately tried to convince myself in the harsh, reassuring light of morning. But the episodes evolved, mutating from a singular horror into a systemic infestation of my life. The shadow figure started appearing not just in my bedroom, but in the hallway or standing in the doorway to the living room, always watching, its head tilted as if studying a peculiar specimen, and I began to see it in my peripheral vision at work, flickering at the end of a long corridor or reflected for a split second in a dark monitor screen. A hint that it was following me, that the boundary between the paralysis and my waking world was beginning to decay. Then it started bringing friends. Last month, I woke into that dreaded paralysis to find 3 of them, tall and slender, ringing my bed, a silent, static tribunal. They weren't just shadows anymore. They had a substance to them, a texture like static on an old TV, a buzzing, particulate matter that seemed to eat the light, and they were leaning over me, their needle-like fingers hovering just above my skin, not touching but close enough that I could feel the intense cold radiating from them, a dry ice burn that promised unimaginable pain. The hum was deafening, a roaring in my ears that blocked out all other sound, and with it came a pressure, not just on my chest, but inside my head, like a psychic drill boring into my mind, and I could feel them sifting through my memories, my fears, my regrets, like pages in a book, pulling them out and examining them with a clinical, cruel detachment. They showed me things. A memory of getting lost in a supermarket when I was 5, the overwhelming terror of the towering, colorful aisles, but in their version, my mother never found me, and I was left there forever, a small, forgotten thing in a world of giants, and the feeling of abandonment was so real, so acute, it felt like my heart was being torn from my chest. They showed me a future where I made a fatal miscalculation with a patient's medication. Their face. A kind old man named Mr. Henderson who always thanked me for the extra pudding. Morphing into a grotesque mask of accusation as he flatlined, the screaming of the heart monitor merging with the screaming in my head. I felt the grief, the shame, the professional ruin, as if it were real, as if I were living it in that moment, and they fed on that emotion. I could feel them drinking it in, their static forms seeming to pulse with a faint, sickly light. They are emotional vampires, and my terror is their feast, my despair their finest wine. The worst part is the lingering feeling they leave behind, a psychic residue of utter hopelessness that clings to me for days, a gray filter over the world that makes it hard to get out of bed, to care for my patients, to even eat, as if all the color and joy has been siphoned out of existence, leaving only a hollow, ashen shell. I started seeing a therapist who called it complex post-traumatic stress manifesting through parasomnias. Her voice calm and rational, her notepad a symbol of a world that could be explained and categorized, a world I was desperately trying to get back to. She gave me breathing exercises, told me to establish a bedtime routine, to avoid screens before sleep. They don't work. Nothing works. 2 nights ago, the paralysis hit as I was drifting off, a sudden and violent seizure of my body, and the room was empty, no shadow figures, no static men, just the oppressive weight and the deafening hum. For a fleeting second, I felt relief, a foolish, fleeting hope that maybe it was over. Then I heard the scratching. It was a soft, dry sound, coming from directly beneath my bed. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It was methodical, patient, the sound of something with long, brittle claws slowly dragging them across the wooden floorboards back and forth, in a rhythm that was almost lazy, as if it knew it had all the time in the world and I had none. I tried to turn my head, to look over the edge, but I was locked in place, staring at the ceiling, my eyes straining in their sockets, my breath caught in my throat, each scritch a nail hammering into my coffin of fear. The scratching stopped and was replaced by the sound of ragged, wet breathing, the kind you hear from a patient with congestive heart failure, a gurgling, labored inhale and exhale that sounded like it was filled with fluid. It was close, right under me, its mouth just inches from the floorboards separating us. Then I felt it, a cold, bony hand, fingers like icicles, wrapped slowly around my ankle from beneath the bed. Its grip was impossibly strong, a vice of frozen flesh and bone, and it began to pull, not with a violent jerk, but with a steady, relentless pressure, as if it had all the time in the world to drag me down into the darkness under the bed frame. A space I knew was only a few inches high but now felt infinitely deep. I could feel the rough splinters of the floorboard against my heel as my leg was pulled over the edge, the cold air of the void beneath washing over my skin, and I knew with a terrifying certainty that if it managed to pull me all the way under, I would never come back, that I would be trapped in that cramped, black space forever with that thing. That's when the screaming started in the apartment next door. A man's voice, raw with terror, shouting, "Get away from me! Get them away!" And the sound was so desperate, so real, it cut through the humming and the breathing for just a second. And in that moment I knew, it wasn't just in my head. This thing under my bed, the shadow people, they were real, they were tangible, and they were hunting in my building, moving from apartment to apartment, feeding on all of us, and my neighbor was experiencing his own version of this hell right now, his own personalized terror. The pulling stopped. The hand released its grip, its cold fingers slipping away from my ankle, leaving a phantom chill behind. The paralysis broke. I haven't slept since. I sit in my living room with every light blazing, a kitchen knife on my lap, listening. I hear things now, through the walls, whimpers, sometimes a single, choked-off scream, followed by an unnatural silence that is somehow worse than the noise. The humming has started again, a constant, low-grade threat in the back of my mind, a reminder that they are still here, that they are just waiting for me to slip up, to close my eyes for 1 second too long. They are toying with me, letting me know that there is no sanctuary, that the waking world and the nightmare world are beginning to bleed together, and the hospital and my home are now just different rooms in the same endless, haunted ward. I'm not just afraid of falling asleep anymore. I'm afraid that the next time I wake up from the paralysis, I won't be in my bed. I'll be wherever it is they take you, in the dark, under the bed, with the thing that breathes and scratches. And I know, with a certainty that has become my only truth, that it's only a matter of time.